colleague that came to you and said, I'm kind of thinking about what you're doing, but I really don't understand what it's about. What would you say? Like, what would be your elevator speech?
Sure. So just kind of spitballing on one of the first days of class with the students, I asked them all, I said, okay, you're all in Phil now. What does that mean? Who can tell me what Phil
Mhm.
stands for?
Okay.
And none of them knew. So we went through it, and I had a heck of a time trying to get the guidance department to name it correctly. Facilitated interdependent language learning was too many characters for our system, so I think we narrowed it down. I think we just call it Phil in our program. So the students see it as Phil. So we had a good conversation about what exactly that meant. And the language learning part is easy. The facilitated interdependent part it was like a 5 to 10 minute conversation on what those two words meant. And so I explained
Mhm.
how I am a Spanish teacher. I'm not an ASL teacher. I'm not a German teacher, but being, a language learning expert, quote unquote, I can facilitate your language learning. I can give you the tools that you need, and I can give you guidance and sort of what would I do if I were in your situation. So hence the facilitator part, and then the interdependent part. And I told them about how the that you folks named it interdependent. Specifically, it's not independent. They're not sitting by themselves in pods learning independently of one another. Instead, we're all working together interdependently. I'm working with students. I'm in turn learning from the students. Students are working with one another, learning from one another. So I guess my gut would say to lead with the title and to really stress what makes it facilitated and what makes it interdependent.
I'm thinking of that's really a nice summary there, Ryan. I'm thinking Phil fills in the gap in your education in that you can choose what language you want to learn and how you want to learn it with the guidance of a facilitator. I like Phil fills. You're not mandated what you're going to, but you get to have the whole idea is that you have choice, right? That you can choose your language and how you want to learn it with the help of
Yeah,
a mentor.
which is one of the important guiding principles. But I really would like to take a few minutes now and get an update from Ryan about how the last week has been, or 2 weeks. Um, we're we're so excited
He's sort of
that
smiling.
Yeah, it's been a fun week. I'm thrilled to be working with the Phil learners again. I think, like I mentioned in the email, I've got 9 ASL, 7 French, a Portuguese, a Korean, an advanced Korean, who's working on her native slash heritage language, German learner, 2 Latin learners. I, I think
Wow.
that's it. But no, it feels that the energy in the room is great, and I can't wait for you to come visit Tom and see what's going on. But I just kind of bounce around the room, check in. I take a look at everybody's weekly goals, and I don't know if it's just because I'm more experienced or because it's a different group of learners, but it feels more. Um, I don't even know what the right word is. It feels more facilitated than last year. And I guess I guess it's just from having gone through it and seeing the outcomes. But as far as connecting learners to their can-do statements and getting them reading those and understanding, the difference between novice mid, novice high, for example, connecting those to content and topics of their choice. Yeah, I'm walking around the room and over here I've got the ASL learners in a group of they put themselves in a group. Every class they come in, they put their desks together
I
in this
love that.
rectangle of 9 learners, and they're just sort of there engaged the entire time, looking at YouTube shorts of ASL, TikTok videos, and just sort of mirroring what they're seeing, and they're teaching each other. And every single class, they tell me like, "Oh man, I learned so much today," and they tell me what they learned. And these 2 girls picked a song that they wanted to learn how to sign together, and so they're going through and they're signing the song while saying the lyrics. That happened yesterday.
You brought the
Um,
joy back into learning, didn't you?
oh my goodness, yeah. In short, yes. Um, and I'm working on putting together. I took my Spanish vocab, so I sort of took I'll just hold it up and I'll send this out. This is my Spanish 1 vocab. and I try to put everything. Um, my goal in creating this was that it was going to be very conversational. So I start off the page with like a question and an answer, but lots of pictures, and so very visual, with lots of target language. And now I'm working through putting this into each of the languages that's in the room. So I made a Korean one, a Portuguese one, a Latin one, um, a French one. And so everybody
Could
has sort of the, sorry.
could they do that for you?
So they
I mean,
could. In fact, I have my Spanish 3 students currently doing this to my Spanish 2 vocab, in order to have them review the Spanish 2 vocab. Uh, and we'll see how it goes. They need a lot of guidance as far as the formatting and everything. But yeah, it is something that I think the learners could do. Um, and so I think, yeah, that's a good idea. I'll give them my Spanish template and say, see if you can put this into Italian and French. Um, so I think that will be sort of the next step. But at least this way they have somewhere to start and see exactly what it is that I'm looking for here. Um, but yeah, and I think really having them come up with can-do statements to guide their goals for the week. For example, by the end of the week, I will be able to listen to a conversation on sports and be able to pick out the main topics. Or the Latin learners, for example, I will be able to read a text and be able to understand the names of people and places from that text, things like that. And then they have the chart where they can write down their activities for throughout the week. So I tell them start at the end, the backwards planning. By the end of the class on Friday, I will be able to do these things and then work backwards. Okay, if I can do that by Friday, then by the end of Wednesday, if my goal is to be able to, understand a conversation on sports, then by the end of the day on Wednesday, I should be able to pick out, various sport words. Um, and then at the end of the week, kind of going through and reflecting on the learning. What did you learn? What worked? What didn't work? And another sort of weekly task that I'm implementing is to uh, listen to target language music throughout the week. And then by the end of the week, pick out your favorite artist and album from the week. What were your top 3 songs from that album? And I want them listening to the target language in class, out of class, whenever, just to be able to hear the words and start putting, I tell them look at the lyrics too, put the words together with the script, just to keep them engaged and enjoying it. And my Japanese learners were having a blast the other day because there's this one boy in the class he did German last year in Phil, and now he's doing Japanese. He switched over. He was cracking up on the names of the bands. He found a Japanese rock group called Mr. Children, and that tickled his funny bone. He was cracking up about that for a good 5 minutes straight. And then he found another band called Ms. Green Apple, another Japanese rock band. But he was listening to them, and he had his headphones on. And as I'm walking around, I said, let me give a listen to Ms. Green Apple. And it was good music. It sounded kind of disco-y pop rock, but in Japanese. And then there was another boy who looked up French country music, and I gave it a listen, and it kind of sounded like Irish, like a Irish rock folk song, but in French, obviously. So
I just
yeah.
can't help think that it must be so, like Ali said, they're able to rediscover the some of the real joy of learning what they want to learn
Hmm.
at the pace they want to. One thing I was curious about is since you seem to have more clusters of students this year than, last year it was just a few in each of the different languages, are they still able to work and set independent goals and work independently and not worry about trying to keep, and I know it's early still, but I just wonder about that. Are they also not falling back into the idea of I have to be part of a group that's going at the same pace and we're all learning things together, or it's all right for some of us to be doing different things and our learning goes differently.
Yeah, absolutely. So in that group of 9 ASL learners, I think that they kind of have like their partner that they sit next to, who with whom they're working together. So in that cluster of 9, it seems like they've put themselves into groups of 2 to 3, and they all sit in the. I don't have assigned seats, but they all sit in the same spot each class. They're establishing those habits early on, and I don't see any evidence of them trying to keep up with one another. If anything, they might choose to have friendly competitions with one another, but that's their choice. I'm not giving them measures that they all have to reach. So yeah, it is still very much independent. And they're using different platforms. We got them each an account for asldefined.com, and that's spelled DEAF defined, which was recommended from an ASL teacher upstate last year. And it's very affordable. It was $12 per student. So we got each one of them a student access. And so I see, maybe half the students at any given time using ASL Defined, while the other half are looking at music videos, or like YouTube short videos of people signing along to music and whatnot. And fortunately, one of the ASL learners this year is a returning student from last year who had been going to the deaf community get together at the mall every other week, and so she's able to mentor the students. And the student that's learning novice Korean is a heritage Portuguese speaker, so he can sort of coach the girl who's learning Portuguese as a novice learner. And then the girl who's learning advanced Korean, she had taken the stamp test already. She scored at least a 7 in the reading and the listening, and her writing and speaking was either a 5 or a 6. And so now she's really, actually, I think it might only be the speaking. I think she has to do writing and speaking, bring that up to a 7. So now she's really plugged into, her presentational skills, and just thinking about ways to get that advanced level content that she needs in order to reach that on the stamp test. And so one of the things we talked about today was I asked her, think about things that you're learning in other classes. Ask ChatGPT to come up with an advanced level article in Korean on something that you're learning in one of your other classes, and then that way, you're getting your Korean practice, but you're also plugged into some content that you're learning in another class as well. And I mentioned that today to the 2 Latin learners. So for the Latin stamp test, they only have to do the reading portion. So they can get a certificate of multiliteracy. Other states call it the seal of biliteracy. They can get that just by achieving intermediate mid in reading, which is pretty cool. So they're locked in on that and reading these ancient texts and whatnot. So
One of the
Ryan,
things as you're
sorry.
talking that's so exciting is that you're really creating an attitude of openness, which, that whole intercultural concept of being open to something as they're discovering it themselves. And
mhm.
so they're not making judgments, and then they're able to share it with other group if they have a group or even with others.
Ryan, I have a quick question for you.
Sure.
Are you experiencing any transition difficulty going from your fill class to your non-fill class, or your non-fill class to your fill class?
No, not difficulty, but I'm starting to see Phil filter into my other classes as well. Just thinking about giving the students opportunities to explore what it is that they want to explore, and really hammering on the can-do statements more so in my other Spanish classes. So like in the past, 2, 3 years ago, I would read the proficiency documents, and I would understand what the can-do statements are, but I wouldn't necessarily print them off and give them to the students. And so I'm doing more of that now. One thing that I did was we have the learning management system Schoology, similar to Google Classrooms. I put the can-do statements and the 2024 ACTFL proficiency guidelines on Schoology, so the students could download it to their laptops. We have a laptop cart here, and so what I instructed them to do was to, open up a tab in Schoology so they could download those documents, open up a tab in ChatGPT. I showed them how to create a project in ChatGPT, upload the can-do statements and the proficiency guidelines to their project. And now when they're, talking to ChatGPT and they say, give me a intermediate mid-level dialogue, ChatGPT says, oh, I know exactly what intermediate mid is. So if anything, I'm sort of coaching them on the things that I'm doing, for my own language learning, for my own language teaching, showing them how to do it on their own. And it's pretty funny. We had a new student this year, and when I told him to open up ChatGPT, that I was going to show him how to do a couple things, he was like, man, most teachers hate ChatGPT, but you love ChatGPT. And I said, well, most teachers, don't know how to use ChatGPT, unfortunately, but I do. So, just coaching them on how to use this technology and how to pair it with things like the can-do statements goes a long way.
Ryan, that's also amazing. So a couple of questions. One is that last year, didn't you have like 5 students that would have been in an advanced Spanish class, but you couldn't hold that one, and so they were part of Phil? If you don't have students like that in Phil this year, is that because nobody's at that level anymore? Or is it because you've actually got a full class that's separate?
So right now, the only advanced learner I have is the Korean native speaker. Next semester, I do have. We tried to do the advanced level Spanish course again, but had to fold it due to enrollment again, unfortunately. And boy, I tried everything getting that on the schedule. I even tried having them combine advanced Spanish with a native speaker class, but I thought that was going to work, but I don't know, it fell through for whatever reason. So those students are in Phil next semester. There's one of them is a returner from Phil last year who was doing advanced Spanish. And I want to say I have 2 to 3 others who would have taken our college level Spanish class, but instead are taking Phil. So they're going to be working on trying to get their advanced level on the stamp test again this year. So yeah. And next semester is most of my returners. This semester I have 3 returners. The rest are freshmen or upperclassmen who are new to Phil. And so that's an interesting dynamic too, because last year there was a lot of pressure to get them to novice high in order to fulfill their graduation requirement. Whereas this year, now that I have learners who've already gotten their graduation requirement, we can just focus on the joy of learning language, which is really exciting.
Amazing.
Ryan, have you noticed much lag in the language skills from when they finished last year in December until they restarted with you now? Or did you find that some of them still were working on their own over those months? I'm just curious.
Good
The
question.
the ASL user was definitely working on her own, going to those deaf community meetings, which is great to see. Obviously when you're using it outside of the classroom is when you really grow in proficiency and that longevity of proficiency. My other returning student who's sticking with French, he's a native Portuguese speaker, so I don't notice too much decline in his French, but I think that was aided by his proficiency in Portuguese. And then the other boy who did German last year, I don't think he kept with his German. So I don't know exactly why he chose German last year, but for whatever reason, he opted out of German. Yeah, so I would say there was a proficiency decline there. I think he found German to be pretty challenging, and is now working on Japanese. But it's an interesting. I got 3 boys working on Japanese, and they all seemed. I don't know if they knew each other before or if they just kind of met here, but they all seem to click very well. There's one boy who has some proficiency in Japanese from previous study. The library down the street offers Japanese lessons on Tuesdays and Thursdays, so I believe he's been doing that. So he's coming to us with some pre-built Japanese proficiency and has kind of taken the other 2 under his wing as far as telling them, the difference between hiragana and katakana and when to use what and things like that, stroke order. Um, so
I love that, Ryan. What you just described when you were describing what those boys were, helping each other with is exactly what we're talking about in facilitator. You are not
mhm,
proficient in Japanese, but you know some things about languages and you know some things about Japanese. So you can speak about it and support the students in an effective way because you know that those are all things that will be important to them. You're
yeah,
informed in that sense. And you'd have to become informed for any new language that got added too. And that's what we're really talking about is key in the mindset of being in that facilitator role. It's like I'm not going to say, oh, that's beyond my scope because I don't speak Japanese, so I don't need to know anything about it.
yeah, yeah. It's definitely been a big transformation from myself as well, going from a Spanish teacher, but now I identify as a world language teacher. Um, and I'm at varying proficiencies across these languages, most of them novice low, but I'm working at it. And I think over the course of a few years of Phil, I could potentially eventually I think I want to take the stamp test in a few different languages and just to see what happens. But yeah, and part of being the facilitator is that I have access to the copier. So I can, when they say like, Senor Allen, print off the kanji practice for us, the hiragana practice. They tell me what they want and I hopefully remember to get it to them. And today I did, so I'm going to give that them to tomorrow. And yeah, a lot of it comes back to finding the resources that they need and getting it to them, and then they do the rest.
Ryan, with
Wonderful.
your permission, I'd love to take some clips from today's tape to put together something because this has just been heartwarming for me as an educator to hear about what your students are doing and what you're doing with them and the difference that it has made. And I think it would be very helpful for others to hear about it as well and to see how this is really working in practice.